Good evening. It is 7:02 here in the Cardinal Room of the Upper Dublin High School, and I'd like to call to order the January 27th, 2020 legislative meeting of the Board of School Directors of the Upper Dublin School District. And I welcome everyone here and also watching at home. First, if we could, the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Please rise. I pledge allegiance. Thank you. Ms. Evans, roll call, please.
Dr. Davis, Mr. Henderson, Ms. Ionetti, Dr. Levinowitz, Mr. Ropsky, Mrs. Sherpier, Mr. Sirota, Mr. Wallach, Ms. Francic.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to provide a brief welcome, and then we'll turn it over to the presentations for the evening. First, I would like to thank everyone who attended the really successful Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service event at the high school. It seemed like an extraordinary turnout, and I just wanted to say thank you. There were many, many volunteers who coordinated those efforts. Thanks to all who attended. Also, we'd like to welcome tonight Carmina Taylor. She's the president of the Ambler Branch of the NAACP. She's going to be making a presentation, so it's listed on your agenda under 4A regarding educational equity, and we're really looking forward to hearing from her this evening. Also, in tonight's other business, Dr. Levinowitz is going to be sharing the PSBA Principles of Governance and Leadership for adoption by our board. And just a quick announcement that in February, on the 13th, which is a Thursday, we're going to be hosting our first town hall of 2020. The topic matter will be the budget, and we'll be having some additional information coming out soon about the location and more about the agenda for that, but we're just going to start talking about that date to remind folks. And finally, just be mindful, please, that our proceedings this evening are recorded, they're being broadcast, and the microphones are live. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our student representative, Daniel Kaplan. Mr. Ropsky, yes, thank you.
Thank you. To start, I would just like to wish everyone a belated Happy New Year, and I hope everyone had an easy start to their 2020. After the long Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, students have settled back into things and quickly transitioned studying for midterms, which began last Friday, January 24th, and will end tomorrow. Friday featured exams in English and Sciences, while today Math and History midterms were given, and tomorrow the exams given are also for Sciences, Math, Social Studies classes, or other special elective classes. Despite the stressful tests ahead, sports teams such as our girls basketball team have been nonstop working hard, and after a win against Garnet Valley last night with a score of 36-28, they've continued their winning streak now at 5, and hope to continue it tomorrow night against Upper Moreland. As for the arts department, rehearsals for the spring musical Cinderella are well underway. Additionally, the UDHS Theater Department is hosting the second annual Move Up Day for elementary school and middle school students alike on Saturday, February 8th. The high school students will guide the younger actor and actresses through various workshops and games. Also for the arts, our very own Upper Dublin High School student Benjamin Brown, sophomore, performed at district choir as 8th chair for Tenor 2 on January 16th and will be moving on as 5th chair for Tenor 2 for regional choir. In other news, forms for our annual overnight volleyball marathon have been released for some time now, and teams have been working hard to raise money in order to participate. All the proceeds will be divided between Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania and the guidance program Speak Up. The event is set to take place on February 21st. Speaking of sporting events, as I'm sure you all know, a number of Upper Dublin High School teachers participated in the Staff versus Harlem Wizards game this past Saturday, bringing the community together for an entertaining event. As for class news, junior prom tickets are set to go on sale from February 6th till February 13th, and the date for prom itself has been set for March 21st. With all these exciting things yet to come, students are thrilled to be halfway through this school year and are looking forward to the fresh start the third quarter will bring this Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And I think you might have been not feeling your best last time, so thank you for coming. We're hoping you're feeling better. All right, moving on now to our presentation by the superintendent, Dr. Yanni.
Thank you, Mrs. Francic. First, we'd like to wish everyone a happy Lunar New Year. The Lunar New Year was on Saturday, and this is the year of the rat. I'd like to bring to everyone's attention that today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th, the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau, as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. On this annual day of commemoration, the UN urges every member of the UN to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and the millions of victims of Nazism. January is School Director Appreciation Month. We thank our Board of Directors for their dedicated volunteer service to Upper Dublin. In addition to attending meetings, our school directors spend countless hours each month preparing for committee meetings and having conversations at various meetings and at district events, all in the support of our students. The support that our school directors provide is truly appreciated, and there is a certificate of appreciation at each of your seats. As Ms. Francic said, we had a very successful MLK Day of service. I really want to thank everyone who was part of that, whether they were volunteering to run an event or were just there to help out. It was really great to see everyone come together, and we had hundreds of people in our cafeteria downstairs. It was really, really a great thing to see. As Daniel mentioned, the Harlem Wizards game was last evening. It appears that the total raised was $17,000, and next year I'll go on record saying if Mr. Sample plays, I will play next year too. Wow. Are we on? I'd have to look up what that means, but then after that, yes. I'm known for my height. Tonight, I'm asking the board for their approval of our new supervisor of special education at Sandy Run Middle School, Ms. Erin Schwenk. Erin comes to us from the Pennsbury School District and brings with her years of experience and knowledge as a speech and language pathologist, as an IEP facilitator, and as a supervisor of education. When Mrs. Clegg, our Director of Pupil Services, retired, we took the opportunity to restructure our special education department, and now each level, elementary, middle school, and high school, will have a dedicated supervisor, with the idea that if we provide better support and supervision to our teachers, we'll be able to support our students in a much better way. So we welcome Erin, and we look forward to having her officially in the district. For some time, the district has been exploring the topic of adolescent sleepiness. Last year, we conducted a study, and we asked our students in grades 5 through 12 to respond to a series of questions about adolescent sleepiness and how they believe that their sleepiness affects them during the school day. If you've been watching the news, there are several districts that have changed their school start time. We are meeting as a task force because we want to continue to look at the issue in a comprehensive and holistic way. So we're not necessarily looking at any one fix to adolescent sleepiness, but on our main page of the website, there is a ton of information that we have collected and the agendas and minutes from our meetings about adolescent sleepiness, and you'll be hearing more about that as the year progresses. A number of us have had the ability to stop by the Sandy Run construction site, and we did share a construction flyover. The footprint of the building is moving along, and we will start to see the skeleton of the building, the structural steel, within the next month or so. Please stay tuned to our district calendar for all the upcoming events that we have going on. And please remember that our website is the best source of information about the district, but also our social media footprint. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yanni. I wanted to add one note to what he said. The entire administrative team, or most of it, have Twitter handles. So if you find Dr. Yanni, who has a really robust Twitter presence, they also are sharing a lot of the great things that are happening in the buildings every day as they're happening. And though I can't be in all the places I'd like to be every day, it's really allowed me to kind of stay abreast of what's happening. So I thank all of you for the time that you're putting into that, because I think it really helps our community to see that, and for you, Dr. Yanni, for leading the way on that. Now moving to our presentations, we'd like to invite Carmina Taylor to our podium, and perhaps you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work.
I'm pretty loud. Good evening, everyone. I am going to run through my presentation because my introduction is in the middle. Is that okay? All right. Let's see this. So I'm just going to go ahead because I came prepared. If it didn't work, who needs bells and whistles?
And Carmina, I know you're probably very loud.
Yes.
Um,
I'm not
but
loud enough?
We're
Oh, wow.
recording, so we're going to put that even closer to you,
That's really interesting.
because we want everyone at home to hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. I want to first just start off by saying thank you to you guys. Thank you for being the only school district of my four, and I'll tell you my four after I go on. Thank you for being the only district of my, huh? Oh,
Just for a second, yeah.
oh.
Just give this a...
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke. I'd like to first say thank Brooke because she's just a champion, right? Because she's been really good to me all day today. So thank you, Brooke. All right, let's move on. All right, so I want to first start off and say thank you. I have four school districts under the NAACP, Upper Dublin, Wissahickon, North Penn, and Souderton. And you are the only school district of my four that all of your candidates for the general election in the school board participated in the Educational Equity Forum. And I think that's remarkable because I had much resistance from two school districts, and three actually, all three. But I really want to say that I really appreciate that. I also wanted to thank you for being the only school district to equally agree, all the candidates that participated in our school board forum equally agreed that if they got elected or not, they would still remain committed with the NAACP as a community partner, and I think that's admirable too. I have been in communication with some of the candidates that did not win and that expressed an interest to still work with me to work with you. Third, thank you. I want to really thank you for being the only school district of my three to have your memorandum of understanding on your website without requiring a community stakeholder to submit a right to know request, making it completely fully accessible and transparent for your whole school community. Maybe your school community may take that for granted, but I can tell you that most school districts don't have their memorandum of understanding on the website or do not make it easy for people to understand why they do the things that they do. And lastly, I want to thank you for being the only school district of my four to allow the Ambler Branch NAACP the opportunity to be placed on the board agenda, to fully share our concerted presentation to affirm our commitment to serve your youth, your students, your families, and the rest of your community stakeholders. So thank you very much. So, in accepting the mantle of leadership bestowed upon the virtue of our charter, the NAACP Ambler Branch is required to pursue the vision and mission of the association. As such, the vision of the NAACP is to ensure a society in which all individuals have equal rights, and there is no racial hatred or racial discrimination. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure that political, educational, and social, economic equality of rights are for all, and that to eliminate racial hatred and discrimination. Good evening. My name is Carmina Taylor. I'm the president of the Ambler Branch. Tonight, I'm here to introduce my education chair, Mr. Jeff White. He could just stand up. He's so used to, he used to stand up with me on the podiums in the rest of school districts, and I kept talking, and he was standing there. So this is our last one, so he's just being a trooper by just staying in the cut over there. Thank you, Jeff, for hanging in there with me. He will be your representative for, from our branch to your school district moving forward. He and the Ambler Branch is vested in the work related to the vision and the mission of the NAACP, and so is our education committee. We are all invested in educational equity with the Upper Dublin School District. On September 24th of last year, September 24th, our branch hosted a school board forum with your general election school board candidates, centered around all facets of educational equity. What we gleaned from that experience was that all of us were going to remain committed to collectively working together about climate and culture in the district, and that we would remain committed to adequate resource funding policies. In turn, I recall stating that the Ambler Branch would remain vigilant in protecting all students as it relates to discipline policies. Therefore, as it relates to any potential misperceptions of disparities in discipline, we are proactively submitting a right-to-know request tonight, as we have with all of our school districts, to ascertain trends from the past that might lead to greater understanding of the present conversations we are having with district families today. And Mr. Leckman, I have it right here. Thank you. On November 14th of last year, the Ambler Branch hosted a community conversation with our police chiefs. We have 14 police departments in our jurisdiction. There were Upper Dublin School District representatives present, and I just want to say you were the only one of my 4 that had school district officials that came out, responded to my invitation to have a conversation, and that's just exemplary. So by the end of the evening, they expressed an interest of working with us in the future. So at this time, I'd like to submit a proposition to the board. Because I wanted to put together a middle school program with the Ambler Branch and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, formerly known as NOBLE, to work with your middle school students to receive hands-on law enforcement awareness and de-escalation tactic training in an effort to reduce and effectively handle any potential confrontational situations they may face. Additionally, the NOBLE officers will come and speak about being tech smart and how to protect themselves against cyberbullying. One of the things that we did in August, actually, there was a report from the Inquirer that 11 police departments in Montgomery County did socially biased posts on Facebook. Well, Upper Dublin was one of them. I reached out to your chief of police. He was exceptional. I reached out to him on a Sunday morning. And I said, we have to deal with this. And he said, let's deal with it, and he embraced it. And what we did after that is we brought all the 14 police chiefs, and we spent August, September, and October putting together a comprehensive community engagement plan. And what we basically did is we looked at all the demographics of our community, from kindergarten to seniors. Every demographic, we have some outreach effort that reduces biases in policing or perceptions, or offers opportunities to diversify the police force and diversify engagement. So I would like to express our interest in working with your middle school students and partnering up with NOBLE. I think it's exceptional. So I'm also pleased tonight to announce that I'm so excited that your district is hosting the 111th anniversary of the NAACP on February 12th. I'd like to take a side note and just say how thankful and grateful I am that you have the best superintendent of my 4 school districts. And let me tell you why. let me tell, excuse me? Well, I'm just gonna stick with my 4 because that's what's important right now. But I want to just tell you how, what a breath of fresh air it has been to be able to go to an administrator of a district and have him listen to you and respond and give me feedback and give me support. So I just want to say, whoever made the decision, whatever board composition that was at that time, you made a great decision. The highlight for this anniversary is that we're going to have our second annual essay contest. This year, we're focusing on race and equity. We've invited all the students in Upper Dublin from elementary, middle school to participate. We're going to have it, I guess, around the way where the Performing Arts Center is, right? It's not like in this place. The other thing that we're doing on February 12th is we are publicly launching our Race and Equity Student Ambassadors Program. And that is absolutely humongous. It's never been done before. We have 4 school districts participating, cross-section. It's Cheltenham, Norristown, Upper Dublin, and North Penn. And these kids are getting an intensive training on cultural proficiency separately. And then we are asking students from each of the schools to come to Cheltenham in the spring, in March and April, where we're going to do a 3-part series on Many Rivers to Cross, a PBS documentary. And the kids are going to have documentary and dialogue and discussion on March and April. And then on June 14th, because May is all the MCAS and the Keystone testing, we are going to have a community conversation at the Ambler Theater, and it's going to be an intergenerational conversation. So we've been working with the kids since the fall, or the students since the fall. By the time we get to the spring, we hope that the students will have confidence to engage with all segments of our community about race and equity. So I just want to say that Upper Dublin is just awesome, and we want to continue to work with you. One of the other things that we're doing on February 17th, and I'm going ahead, is that one of my school districts is in North Penn, and some black fathers have come up to the call of action, and they're going to lead a discussion, and they're starting an initiative called Black Fathers Committed to Change. And what we found is that some of the African American students in the middle school and high school had they felt biases from their police departments. And the police departments have responded. And we're going to have a conversation with the police, black fathers, families, and students. Now, it's just not for black people, but the emphasis is how some of the black students feel about how the police kind of go over their school districts. And I'm really blessed. I mean, I almost want to pinch myself because I can't believe that I'm getting such great support across the board. But even though it's in North Penn, it's at the North Penn YMCA, 6 o'clock, it's President's Day, so the students don't have school. Upper Dublin can still be part of the conversation because you're part of my NAACP family. Lastly, my last proposition to the board is that we'd like to pilot a Ambler Branch African American Public Education Week, and we'd like to do that February 24th to the 28th. And our education committee would basically communicate to school officials notable African Americans that have contributed to public education. One of the wonderful things that we'd like to do on February 27th, that Thursday, we have already made arrangements to have our membership meeting at the North Hills Community Center. But what we'd like to do is recognize every African American employee you have at Upper Dublin, from the custodian to the administrators, and thank them and recognize them for their contributions to your school district. So I have started talking to Dr. Yanni about that, but I think this is really important because when I met with another superintendent, and he was talking about American Education Week and how that's a big deal. But we need to really focus on what the African American community has contributed, and people of color and students that are not of color need to embrace all the diversity that is brought into our public education. And I know some of your employees, and I think they would really appreciate to be validated. And I've talked to some parents as well, and they're behind that. So I think that would be a great proposition. So I'm kind of paraphrasing my report, but what I see is the next steps is I don't know who's the chair of the education committee, but I certainly would like to know who that is. So Jeff and the education, are you?
I'm smiling at Mrs. Sherpier.
Oh, so wonderful. How do I pronounce your first name? Titia? Oh, beautiful. So Tithia and Jeff will be connecting, and we can start working together on how we can lay out a plan moving forward. I really don't like to necessarily talk on sheets, but I do have this too, because I'd like this as a former record. I just want to say that civil rights work is a marathon. And being in Montgomery County, I'm a graduate of Wissahickon, so Upper Dublin, you know, was my rival. My 30th, my 30th high school reunion was in October, and our homecoming game was against Upper Dublin, and it was exceptionally nostalgic. But I think that when I look at everything, we're in an awesome opportunity, Upper Dublin School Board, to take the lead in a lot of things that need to be done in this community. You have an excellent superintendent. You have excellent people that were elected to the board. You have excellent parent volunteers. And you have an excellent NAACP branch working with you. I'm a little biased to that. I have an excellent team. Mr. White is a parent in Solderton. I'm very proud that my executive committee are parents. There's representation from each of my school districts in my executive committee. I spoke at Solderton last Thursday, and the community asked the NAACP to put together a Solderton School Community Coalition, never been done before. We're going to have discussions about Title VI and the Civil Rights Act and how that plays with public education. And you guys are already ahead of the game. And I think that we have an opportunity to be the standard and not the exception. And I just am here tonight because I want to convey my commitment and my support for what you're doing, and I'm asking for the same for what we're trying to do. So thank you. And if you have any questions or anything, Dr. Yanni, you have any questions or anything you want to say to me?
I'm good. I'll leave it up to the board if
You're
they have any
good.
questions.
You have nothing else to say to me?
Well, I would like to thank you for coming.
No,
It's been,
I just thank you.
it's been a pleasure to work with Carmina. Carmina and I have collaborated over a number of things, and including some things that were child-specific, particularly over the summer. And Carmina has been helpful in helping us sort out some messy details of messy situations. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So I look forward. Anybody have any?
Anybody else have any questions for Ms. Taylor? On behalf of our school board, first I'd like to say thank you, not only for being here tonight, but for continually inviting us in. I think it's, a very busy, hectic life we all lead, but we really want to prioritize as much as we can the work that you're doing and make it a part of what we're all doing. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. White. You've been volunteered, it sounds like. But we are very, very excited to work with you as well. And we just look forward to
Absolutely.
many good works ahead.
Again, thank you so much for this time, and thank you for putting me on the agenda, or putting my branch on the agenda. Brooke, thank you. Thank you. I'm not letting you go. I have all your 10 digits, and so I'm going to call you directly. So thank you, Brooke. You deserve a thank you. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Okay.
And we all feel that way about Ms. Evans. There is no doubt. We wouldn't be functioning here without her. Up next, Dr. Yanni is going to talk to us a little bit about our strategic plan update.
So the board and members of the audience and the public that may be watching at home know that last year we took our comprehensive plan, which is a required document by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and we really expanded it because what we really wanted to move forward with was a set of coherent plans that would move us from a good district, a strong district, to a district that was truly exceptional. So just as a review, so what is strategic planning? Strategic planning really is a process where we look at our current state and look at where we want to go. What is the desired state? If we could be the best district we could be, what would that look like? And so we created goals around a number of areas, and then through the planning process, we've identified resources that we will mobilize and utilize so that we can achieve all of those goals. we took a look at some focus areas, and we took a complex district and we identified 6 focus areas. So we have teaching and learning, innovation and technology, stakeholder engagement, human resources and labor relations, budget and finance, and facilities and operations. This plan became effective on July 1st. So this is just our first update that we're giving to the board. So this is a more global update about where we are. There'll be a more comprehensive update in June. So let's take a look at what our goals were around teaching and learning. In terms of academic achievement, we put out 3 clear goals about what we want for every single student in Upper Dublin. We said by the end of grade 3, we want 100% of our students to be at minimum at a level of proficiency and to remain on or above grade level every year afterwards. We then used the state benchmark grades for math and writing, so we said by the end of grade 7, we want every single child to be at least at a level of proficiency and continue moving forward, and the same thing in writing in 8th grade. And some of the discussion that happened around those goals, people said, well, should we really have 100%? Do we really need to have 100%? And our comment back was, yes, because every child deserves the most rigorous access to good quality teaching and learning that we can provide for them. And so if we shoot for 100 and we don't meet 100, we look at the kids that aren't reaching those levels of proficiency and we can intervene. But if we don't shoot for that 100%, then we're failing some of our students. I can't look parents in the face and say, well, your kids are part of the 20%, we're not worried about it. Let's say if we're going to go for 80%. So we are quite focused on 100%. And then, in order to build capacity in our teachers, we need to build capacity in our administrative team. And so we've engaged this year with the Center for Educational Leadership out of the University of Washington, and they have been working with 15 members of our leadership team on instructional observations, providing feedback to teachers, really honing the administrator skills so that when we're working with teachers, we can be very explicit about what's working really well in a teacher's classroom and how we can help them improve. So where are we? In elementary reading in particular, we are continuing the implementation of our balanced literacy. So over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work with direct explicit instruction in phonics and also in comprehension. We're piloting Fountains and Pinal Classroom, which is, I would say, fundamentally changing the way our elementary classrooms look and how kids are achieving. And at our February Education Committee meeting, we'll talk in much more detail about that. In math, if you look at standardized test scores in math alone, across the state, they're very low. And so we're missing something. So, you know, we've been so focused on teaching programs, Carnegie, Eureka, what have you, that we're really unpacking standards and asking ourselves, what is it that kids really need to know and be able to do in every grade level? So we've been unpacking that standard. And at the secondary level, in grades 6 through Algebra 1, we've been piloting I'm not going to call it a program, I'm going to call it a philosophy called illustrative mathematics, which is probably one of the best commercial products on the market that we've seen. It is a philosophy and a framework that honors every single kid and moves every single kid forward. In terms of writing, Mr. Hoffman is working on the start of the development of that K-12 framework for writing. When we look at all of the areas of the curriculum, writing was the one glaring piece of our curriculum that we didn't have enough coherence built, K-12, and so it's really important that we have that. And in terms of the Center for Educational Leadership, Dr. Miner has been instrumental in facilitating that process. We are having our closing institute next week, and then the group of us that have been developed this year will be enveloping the rest of our educational leadership team in that work. In terms of technology and innovation, we have been really focused on purposeful integration of technology according to the ISTE standards. So technology, like every other content area or process area, has standards. And we want to continue to take a look at what areas of the curriculum is it very natural and prudent to put technology integration in, so that we're not just doing technology integration for the sake of technology integration, and that we're also taking a pause and saying, where do we need to teach some fundamental skills? How do we teach cyber safety? How do we teach the dreaded K word, keyboarding? What does all of that look like inside our core curriculum, so that technology is not an add-on, but it's integrated within. We've been looking at the adoption of transformative instructional practices. So how are we leveraging technology to look at things like formative assessment, to know how kids are performing in the moment that we're teaching them? How are we using technology to differentiate instruction? And how are we using it to help kids be co-designers of their lesson? We know that when we allow kids to be in the driver's seat of their own learning, engagement goes up and we can get more from them. So how are we leveraging technology for that? We're also looking at conditions for equity and innovation. So we provide Chromebooks in our one-to-one environment from grades 5 through 12. Fifth grade does not take them home, but we know our secondary students do. And I'm looking at Mr. V, and in the grades that we're not one-to-one, we have a good amount of technology that supplements core instruction and doesn't supplant it. So we're continuing to develop coherence around the ISTE standards, identifying those areas where it's natural and appropriate to integrate technology. And if you have elementary students, you'll probably heard that our library special is really becoming a technology special. We're really looking at our library media centers as hubs for innovation through some of the STEM work that we've done. And we're really lucky to have a number of tech leaders. So these are teachers that have a prowess for technology, and they are paid a stipend, and as a result of that, they're working with administration, standing side by side with us as we're providing professional development to their colleagues. When we looked at the idea of stakeholder engagement, we actually did a survey last spring, and it asked a series of questions, and we had 699 respondents to that survey. One of the things that came out, or that was mentioned over and over and over again in that survey, was the ideas of transparency and trust. So we have really tried to be as transparent as possible with the decisions that we're making as a district. So we've been meeting regularly with our labor groups, our Teachers Association and our Support Staff Association. We've really been engaging staff in decision-making processes. You know, I'm a firm believer that the superintendent or any one administrator or even the administrative team doesn't necessarily have all of the answers. And so it's important that we engage folks in decision-making. And then also considering what we hear from formal and informal periods of community input. So we did the stakeholder survey, and one of the things that came out of that survey was a real desire to have some more informal conversations outside of a board meeting about any number of topics. And so last year we had a town hall on the new Sandy Run. This year we have one town hall coming up for budget and finance, and we'll have additional town halls throughout the year that happen organically. And to make sure that we're equitable in our communication, we're communicating widely. So we're not just using a website, we're not just using email, we're not just using social media, we're using all of those tools to really make sure that we're getting our message out in the broadest way possible. One of the most stark changes in our district is the transformation of our Human Resources Department. Our Director of Human Resources, Ashley Kitten, and Megan Candido, our Assistant Director, have really transformed the HR office into a supportive structure for every employee in the district. So obviously, we know we want to attract, hire, and retain really good staff members. And we don't have a high turnover rate here in terms of our administrators or teachers. We do have some turnover in our support staff, particularly educational assistants. And so we're doing some analyses about why that's happening. We want to make sure that when folks are brought into our system, that they're set up for success. And so Ashley has worked really hard to make sure that that onboarding process is really collaborative and gives our new employees what they need to be successful. She's also collaborating with other Montgomery County school districts to recruit a diverse pool of candidates. We really want a staff that's reflective of our student population. And so Ms. Taylor was speaking about some of the work she's doing at the NAACP. We've been looking at our staff diversity numbers. And when we look at our staff diversity numbers, we really need to attract and retain more candidates of color, African American, Black and African American staff members, and also Asian staff members, because that segment of our student population is growing, and we're not growing there in terms of staff diversity. Ms. Kitten has also made it, with some of the technology changes she's making in human resources, much easier for folks to apply to the district. The current way that we have folks apply for positions in the district can be really clunky, and we don't want a clunky system to prevent us from seeing some great candidates. Around budget and finance, this part of the survey was particularly interesting when we looked and we analyzed the results. So one of the things that we are very committed to doing this year is to ensure that we have clear priorities. A budget is a conglomeration of priorities, and as a district, students are our number one priority. So we have student-centered budget and needs-based budgeting happening, and we're being cognizant of the Act 1 index, which this year is 2.6%. We're also increasing transparency around the budget. Last week at Finance, Mr. Leckman presented the preliminary budget using plain, everyday language, helping those that were in attendance or watching at home start to really understand the complexity of our budget in ways that, if you're not a CFO, you can understand. We really need to do some short-term and long-term projections financially so that we can look and say, if we make this series of decisions, what does that mean for our financial future? And of course, we have to make sure that as a district we're complying with all of the requirements set forth by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And so thinking back to last week's presentation that Mr. Leckman did, he started by just explaining the differences between revenues, the money we bring in, and expenditures, the money we spend, and what some of the major budget pressures are, and also the philosophy of how we're building our budget. Last year, we started with the staff building a needs-based budget. This year, we're continuing that philosophy and also looking at that for staffing so that we're deploying our staff in the best interest of our kids across the district. And Mr. Leckman will also continue providing those long-term and short-term financial projections so that we can look out and say, what does our budget look like at the end of this year, at the end of next year, and a few years out? And finally, the facilities and operations section of our comprehensive or of our strategic action plan. We're in a beautiful building. We're building Sandy Run Middle School. Maple Glen is the next newest building, but we know we have Fort Washington, Jarretttown, and Thomas Fitzwater. In addition to the facility that we're using for transportation that we have to look at and make sure that we do a good job of maintaining district assets. So we're identifying some different firms that can do true facility condition assessments. So really not just tell us about the condition of our facilities, but help build a long-range budget plan around our facilities so that we can do upgrades and whatnot. We want to make sure that our buildings support current pedagogy. So, you know, last year at this time, we were planning the Sandy Run Middle School, and we had the opportunity to design a building around what learning looks like right now. Sometimes we're having to retrofit older buildings because things change. And we're also working on developing and implementing safety plans. And for obvious reasons, we don't talk about what those safety plans are in public. But we want to make sure that we meet everyone's expectations that when we bring staff and students into our schools, that they're safe while they're at school. I did a lot of talking because I wanted to give a global update. At this point, I'll entertain any questions, obviously, that the board has, and we will provide another update in June that will report on some of the metrics that we've put in our strategic action plans, because our goals, obviously, we want to have them met or exceeded at the end of the 3-year period. So we'll actually be bringing metrics in June so that we can see our progress towards meeting or exceeding those goals.
Excuse me, questions from board members? That must mean the presentation was spot on. You've raised no questions. But I will raise a comment, which is, I think this is, in my time on the board, the first time we're really consistently pulling these strategic plan goals out and revisiting them and managing our procedures toward them. So I certainly appreciate that. And
we'll be bringing these goals to each individual committee meeting so that as we talk about what we're doing in committee, that we're always tying it back to these goals. So you'll see that moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Yanni. Truly appreciate it. That is the conclusion of our presentations for this evening. Next up, we are going to move to our first community input session for tonight. It is specific to agenda items. And just a couple of notes. We ask that everyone come up, state your name, where you reside in the township. We ask that you address your comments to the entire board, and that you are aware that you're being recorded. So we're just making note of that. That said, if you have input, step on up.
I was debating because it was a presentation, and we had that debate before. So, Jenny Patel, Ambler. I just want to say, not only did we celebrate the Chinese New Year, there was an absolutely fantastic show performed and orchestrated by the Upper Dublin Chinese Association. So I want to thank Xing Kai Kong. I can't say his name, but he's such a great guy, and he did a great job, he and his team. The show was unbelievable, and I really enjoyed it. I'm also glad that Dr. Yanni brought up the Holocaust Remembrance Day today. I feel that that was lacking in our schools today, unfortunately, because it was a really, really big event. There's a lot of Jewish community members in Upper Dublin, and I know that 300 books and Frank books were donated by community members to our school, which was in our curriculum for 2 years in 6th grade, which really spurred interest and an understanding and a wonderful education for my children that got that, to the point that my son actually asked to go to the Holocaust Museum, which we promptly did that summer. I wonder when and if we could bring that back. This is more of an education question. And since we don't have that in 6th grade anymore, when do the kids get any knowledge of this huge event in our history? Thank you.
Just a few quick things. I just want to say, first of all, I really appreciate that you're using, Dr. Yanni's using the
Sorry,
state.
state your name, please.
Oh, sorry. How could I forget that? Anita Brister, Fort Washington, still living in Fort Washington. I just really appreciate that Dr. Yanni's using the stakeholder survey to help guide decisions. And this is, let's see, slide number 9. I may be the only one that's excited by this because it's a pretty basic thing. Yet we didn't hear it for a good, well, at least 4 years. Okay? I'm looking at slide 9, goals. Informed decision-making based on transparency to build trust. Thank you. That's the whole point. When you make decisions that are not transparent, i.e., I'm just going to give one, move a bus garage onto the Field of Dreams, which was paid for largely with taxpayer donations, it erodes trust. So you get the opposite of this. But this is such an important goal. And if that's what came out of the survey, fantastic, but it's also just fantastic that Dr. Yanni understands the importance that without transparency, you will not have a trusting taxpayer base. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Yanni for that. And I do have a question related to it. So throughout the budget process, I know you've been referring to this stakeholder survey specifically, but just a question at some point, like are these, whatever the questions were, which I do remember answering it, but I don't have it in front of me now, have the results actually been compiled in a way that you'll be presenting at a meeting, or could we request it with a right to know request? Like I'd be curious to see the rest of the survey results. So that's a question. Definitely, I'm all in favor of town halls. Dr. Yanni already started that last year, which was fantastic. And this is kind of minor, but actually, to me, it's important. I'm just very, very curious. Why was phonics actually completely removed from our curriculum or partially removed? My kids had phonics. Years and years of kids had phonics who went to Upper Dublin. So I'm just curious if somebody can answer that question as to why such a curriculum change would ever have been made in the first place. Thanks.
Seeing no one else stepping up, we will close community input.
I'll start with the question about the Holocaust and Holocaust education. One of the things that we have been pretty specific about with Mr. Hoffman's arrival is that we need to look at our social studies curriculum, and we need to look at it and deconstruct what's there and not have such a Eurocentric view of the world through our social studies curriculum. So there are any number of topics that you will start to see embedded into the social studies curriculum. The Holocaust is an important topic of study, and history repeats itself, and I'm not just referring to that with the Holocaust, but any major events in history, we really need to start looking at a conflict let me say this. We need to look at concept-based curriculum for social studies. So we're looking through the lens of, for example, conflict, and look at what conflict did throughout any period of history so that we can start to help kids make connections between times in history. The Pennsylvania Department of Education is most likely in the next year going to give a mandate about the number of hours of Holocaust education that has to be put into the curriculum. I would like to see us make that decision well before that mandate comes down, because I think it's, among many other topics, worthy of study. In terms of why phonics was removed from the curriculum, someone wrote a book, and the pendulum swings, and we go from teaching direct explicit phonics to more of a whole language philosophy, and then we create generations of kids that really struggle to read because they haven't had that direct direct explicit instruction, and so the pendulum has swung back. And I really applaud Dr. Miner and our elementary teams over the last couple of years to bring in foundations at the primary level, because what that really did was solidify some very much needed instruction around phonics and decoding that has really benefited our students. And we're embedding things in other grade levels for kids that went through that whole language movement and didn't have that exposure. I'm a former student of whole language, and I had to learn phonics rules when I taught elementary, because I didn't know the phonics rules myself, so I needed to learn them so that I could teach them. And so we want to make sure that kids are not held back from more rigorous opportunities because of their lack of understanding of phonics and decoding. Oh, the stakeholder survey, I'm sorry. The stakeholder survey, the results are all on the website. On the drop-down menu at the bottom of the website, they're compiled there by question so that you can see. And as we talk about various topics throughout the remainder of this year, we'll be bringing up different points of that survey so that there's an understanding of why we're approaching things the way we are.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. Does anybody on the board have any additional comments related to community input this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next segment. Mr. Leckman, are there any announcements or communications?
There are no announcements.
Thank you. If I may, take the minutes from December 12th, 2nd, and 16th, the Operations and Finance Organization and Legislative meetings. I'd like to make a motion to approve those. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Sherpier. Any comments or questions about the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. All right, moving on. Our first committee reports this evening, Mrs. Sherpier, Education Committee.
There are 3 items. The item A is for information only, and then there are 2 motions related to student activities and conferences. The activities were already discussed in committee. The conferences had some additions. Are there any questions about those additions? If not, I propose a motion to approve both the student activities and conferences.
Any comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, those are approved. Moving on now to Education Committee and Technology recommendations.
There are none.
Apologies. I meant to say Pupil Services recommendations.
All right. There are 3. One is for the extended school year programming, one for an educational agreement with a family on behalf of a student, and then the last one is a service agreement to support a student in the district. So I'd like to propose a motion to approve all 3 recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Iannitti. Any comments or questions about these items? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Those are put forward, or approved rather. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Sirotto, we have Operations Committee recommendations.
Thank you. So we have 2 items listed under the Operations Committee and an additional, how many is that? 11 listed under Finance. Because those committees are now combined, maybe we'll continue to break them out similar to the way we've done with Education. But for now, I'm going to make a motion that we approve all of them. All except the first were discussed in committee. That first one is the regular disposal of excess, obsolete, and non-repairable equipment, which includes 1 non-functioning television monitor. So I make a motion to approve the whole set.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Rofsky. Any comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the items are approved. Thank you. Once again, back to you, Mr. Sirota, for finance.
No, I think
Oh,
my
I'm sorry.
intention there was to cover all of those just now. I think I
You
did.
did it all. You're so efficient. Thank you. All right, next up, Ms. Schwank has been so patient. We have our personnel report. Dr. Levinowitz.
We have three items, three sections in the personnel. One is the first two are related. One is the abolishment of the position of Director of Pupil Services. Second is the addition of the position of the Secondary Supervisor of Special Education. And then the third item tonight would be the approval of the entire personnel report. I just wanted to point out that in the audience tonight is Aaron Schrank, who will be, whose name appears as the recommendation from the administration for the middle school special ed supervisor, effective mid-April or sooner, we hope. So I'd like to congratulate her, welcome her to the Cardinal Nest, and I'd like to make that motion.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Sirota. Any opposed? Oh. Dan? Oh, I'm sorry. How about in favor instead of opposed? Sorry, Ms. Schwank. How about, who is in favor? Is everybody in favor? Please say aye. Aye. There we go. Now we got it. Is anyone opposed? Excellent. It's official, Ms. Schwank. Welcome to Upper Dublin. Congratulations. And thank you to Mr. Schwank, too, for being here.
Ms. Schwank, would you like to come up to the podium and just say a few words?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Dr. Yanni and everybody on the board for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be here and to share your vision of the students. I hope to offer my knowledge of special ed law and programs and MTSS process and procedures, and I look forward to an exciting year together. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. And we are next up going to look at our policy committee recommendations. Mr. Wallach.
Thank you. We have 4 topics on the agenda tonight, all of which were discussed in our policy meeting. I'm going to take them in 2 parts, first being the second reading and the second reading repeal. Just so everyone understands and is clear in the audience and at home, second readings are policies that have been through 2 iterations through the policy committee and up here to the legislative meeting, and are for adoption this evening. We have 5 policies for second reading approval: LBP P003, P109, P132, P237, and P716. We also have 2 policies for second reading repeal that will be taken off the books if approved. They're P231.1 and P110. So I'll make a motion for those second reading approvals and repeals.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. Any comments or questions? All in favor of approving those? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. They are approved.
And I will also make a motion for a first reading approval and a first reading repeal of the policies that are listed in items C and D on the agenda. They were also all discussed in policy on first readings, and if they move through, we'll be headed towards second readings next month. So I'll make a motion for the first reading approvals and repeals as listed in subtopics C and D.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. Any comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Those are approved. Thank you. Tonight we have a special piece of other business that I'd like Dr. Levinowitz to discuss.
Okay, thank you. We're now up to the Pennsylvania School Board Association Principles of Governance and Leadership. Approximately 4 years ago, a committee was established by PSBA to establish these principles. We ask that all boards affirm the principles. When a new board comes in, we do it again. There will be a document that will circulate around the board so that each board member and superintendent will sign it. And I think it's very important. Principals, in fact, as the governing board member of PSBA, we are re-examining these principles of governance and leadership to practice good governance and leadership, just not let something stay the way it is for more than a few years. So we're anxious to get your input also on these and how we can make these statements even stronger. I think they really do say a lot, and I know we all believe in these items, and the headings are extremely important, but also the content within each of the headings to advocate earnestly, lead responsibly, govern effectively, plan thoughtfully, evaluate continuously, communicate clearly, and act ethically. So at this point, I'd like to make a motion that that we reaffirm the PSBA principles of governance and leadership.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Dr. Davis. Any comments or questions from the board? All in favor of approving the PSBA rules, governance, please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, they are approved. And thank you, Dr. Levinowitz, for helping to lead the charge on continuing to make these relevant and current. Next up, we have our liaison committee reports. I'd like to make a brief note that as we strive for providing greater information to the community, we are going to roll out in February, prior to the next legislative meeting, written reports from our liaisons. In the past, the reports may have lacked some substance. So we're going to be moving forward with written reports, and then we're going to be able to share out a little bit more of the content of what's happening in those various places. First up, this evening at least, in our traditional format, Dr. Davis, if you could speak to that. The MCIU, Montgomery County Intermediate Unit.
I attended my first Montgomery County Intermediate Unit meeting last week. 3 new members were appointed from several of our school districts. 2 more will be appointed next month. This is a 21-member board, and it really discusses, all the work that's going on through the intermediate unit that provides supports to all of our schools. A couple very important things are happening. They are in a newer building that they moved in several years ago. There are many renovations going on at the old site, and that's really due to the fact that they've expanded many of the programs throughout our county. They are also doing some work even beyond just Montgomery County to support, education across our state. And so those renovations are coming along, and we've been approving, that work and change orders as they have come in. Also, another important work that they're doing is just as we are with our budget. They're working on the budget process, and each district pays a membership services fee. Right now, the projected cost that Upper Dublin would put into that is $64,951. Of course, this is important as we are working on our own budget for us to know what our obligation will be to the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And then finally, work that will be going on there with the board is the fact that the executive director is retiring in September. Therefore, we have to hire a new executive director. So we will be doing a lot of work, just as when we hire a superintendent. It's very comparable. The difference is that 21 different districts are really involved in that process. So that is work that will be ongoing, and I'll give you updates as I have them. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Next, I'll be reviewing a bit about the work of the Montgomery County Legislative Committee, also associated with the IU. I'm just going to give a couple of highlights of what was discussed at our January meeting. I'm going to focus in these reports on the state legislature. I think it's more applicable. First off, discussions, or rather the first initial presentation about the proposed 2020-2021 state budget will be provided by Governor Wolf at the General Assembly February 4th. It's not going to tell us a tremendous amount, but that's when the process begins. We also have had some changes that are reflected in a conversation that was had at our Education Committee and in some of the items that we passed tonight, where we're going to be training our school security guards in a new manner as legislated by the state. So we're right on top of that. We also have a new thing coming in the 2021-22 school year. Dr. Yanni is going to be making a presentation about this within the next couple of months regarding cyber education. All school districts will be required to have a full-time cyber education program, and that's something that we're going to be diving into. So you'll hear more about that in the future. In January, also, recently, Governor Wolf announced the launch of the Reach Out PA Mental Health Matters initiative. What's important to know about that is that Upper Dublin has already begun a lot of, and already has a lot of these supports in place. We have a social worker that's associated with the district. We work with Lakeside Counseling. We have a lot of these supports, and we're going to continue to be advocates for mental health for our students and staff. And finally, I just want to announce and remind the school board that on March 23rd, it is a Monday, is Advocacy Day. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association, along with PAIU and the Pennsylvania Association of Superintendents, will all be in the Capitol, many of us here as well, to advocate for public education in Pennsylvania. And that concludes my report. And now Dr. Levinowitz, Eastern.
3 items tonight. First item, since our legislative meeting next month is so late, the end of February, I wanted to invite the community and everyone and the entire board to the open house on March 1st. I believe it starts at 1. Prior to that, there'll be training for all new board members. You'll be receiving an invitation for that. Item 2 is I wanted to thank you for approving the budget tonight. I have to... I was unable to attend last Finance Committee meeting, but I do apologize for not being there and also for not, I think, keeping the board more informed regarding the capital investments that are required at Eastern. As you know, that there's a separate budget that Eastern is now looking at to support the capital improvements at Eastern. This was a very long process that we did at Eastern. It included an additional committee that I appointed there consisting of a business manager, a superintendent, and another joint operating committee member and staff from Eastern, and we really looked at the various options that Eastern can move forward with generating funds to support the severely needed capital improvements at Eastern. And I think this pay-as-you-go approach will greatly benefit the facility and will benefit all of the students that attend Eastern. Item 3 is if you got the Inquirer this Sunday, you noticed that there was more bang for the buck, the degrees that pay, and I just happened to read the article, and all of a sudden I saw Eastern listed. Eastern is considered not only secondary, that programs that we support, but the Joint Operating at Eastern Committee also has oversight for the adult program, the Licensed Practical Nursing Program. Listed, if you read the article, if you have not yet read the article, Eastern's LPN program, which is a Licensed Practical Nursing Program, was a one-year certificated program, ranked 15th out of all the universities in terms of the best bang for the dollar. University of Pennsylvania was number 2. So we didn't beat them. But in terms of comparing 1 year, 4 years, all those years, I just wanted to congratulate the work that we do at Eastern, not only in the secondary education, but also in adult education, in the LPN program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levinowitz. Ms. Ioniti, if you could share with us about the Equity and Empowerment Steering Committee.
Sure. Okay. As was mentioned earlier, the Lunar New Year celebration was here at the Performing Arts Center. It was standing room only. It was wonderful. It included singing, dancing, martial arts. Sorry, singing, dancing, martial arts. And it was terrific. And thank you to the Asian American Student and Family Committee that helped organize it. Also, last week on Monday was Martin Luther King Day of service at the high school, and we had high school students there, middle school students, even elementary school students were there helping. Sandy Run collected piles of what did I write down? Sandy Run had piles of collections for several various charities. Peace and Shake teamed up with Sankofa Kids Club and did a book collection. And the Fearson family collected and created hundreds of blessing bags. Melanie Butler did a wonderful keynote speech, and we want to thank all the volunteers and our faith-based committee for organizing this important community event. Also, coming up, keep an eye out for some emails, tweets. We're going to have a World Cafe, and we are looking forward to this interactive event where we can talk openly about how to improve our district and the larger community by understanding each other more fully and ensuring equity for all. And lastly, the African American Black Student and Family Committee will be hosting a family event to celebrate Black History Month, Friday, February 28th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Upper Dublin High School. There will be live entertainment, including Chestnut Hill's Dance Fit and Philadelphia's Mandiga Capoeira. Also vendors, food, and lots of fun. And that's it. That's it.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mrs. Sherbier with an update on the Educational Advisory Committee.
All right. The Educational Advisory Committee met on January 8th. They continued work on their three topics, International Baccalaureate, GRIT, and PBML. And we look forward to the reports that will hopefully come later this year. And the next meeting will be February 5th.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Henderson for the Pennsylvania School Boards Association.
Thank you. The regional committee will be meeting in the next couple of weeks, and I will have a full report at our next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the Township Liaison, Mr. Sirota or Mr. Robsky?
Yeah, we did not meet last month in December, but we're planning to meet in mid-March of this year.
Thank you. And for the Upper Dublin Education Foundation, Mr. Wallach.
Thank you. A couple things. As has been mentioned before tonight, the foundation was focused on the Wizards game and the fundraiser last Saturday night. It was a great event. I want to thank everybody that volunteered, everybody that came out. It's a great partnership between the foundation and the faculty through the UDEA. And the money raised goes back right into the school district through educator grants that the faculty and administrators will apply to the foundation for. The most important thing I think that the foundation is working on right now and has been working on for a couple of months and will hopefully bring to a conclusion shortly is its own strategic plan. The foundation, kind of following the district's lead, is developing its own strategic plan with the same ideas that Dr. Yanni presented this evening, goals, actions, resources, to come up with ways to augment its fundraising efforts and to be able to provide more innovation and more support for the students. So as the months come up this spring, I'll have more to report on that development and the many fine activities and events that the foundation plans in order to assist the school district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our liaison committee reports for this evening. And next we have our solicitor's report, Mr. Diazio.
Good evening. Thank you. I have the executive session announcement for this evening, and that is that the board met an executive session tonight, immediately prior to this meeting, from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m., and the board discussed the following items. The items that were on the personnel report that the board approved earlier this evening, one additional matter of personnel, one matter of special education litigation, and the board also received information on but did not deliberate one confidential student matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, we are up to our second opportunity for community input, and this is for any topic. Please come to the podium. Same rules apply. Please state your name and where you're from in the township, in the district.
Hi, my name is Ellie Anderson. I'm a student here at the high school, and I live in Ambler. I believe that all of us have power. We have the power to make a change in our world, big or small. That power comes from a lot of places, one of which being our participation in our civil liberties, such as voting. The student civic engagement policy on the table allows us to do just that. The key here is allows. What I love about this policy is that it gives us the opportunity to have a student-run voter registration drive here at the high school. I've been part of voter registration drives before and would love to be part of this if passed. To give us information about civics and government and the ability and option to register to vote, this policy strengthens the chances of more involved members in our community and our country and will empower students. Learning about civics and in our history classes and is not the same as practicing it out in the real world. This policy could bring us one step further and lead more people to taking part in our democracy, which is something, especially as young people, we need to promote more. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Finn Anderson and I live in Ambler, PA. I'm an 8th grader who goes to Sandy Run Middle School, meaning in just a few years I'll be a senior here in Upper Dublin High School. One thing you should know about me is I love politics, and I'm an activist in and outside of school. That's why the civic engagement policy is so important to me. I, as a student, would value to take part in a drive and would appreciate being able to register through a drive. Students don't always know how or when or where to get the information. The voter registration drive supplies an easier and more educational way to learn about our voter rights. Thank you.
Hi, my name is, do you need to reset it? The clock. Okay, thanks. Hi, my name is Jennifer Anderson, the third of the Andersons, speaking tonight about the policy number 146, the student engagement policy. I live in Ambler with my 4 kids. I understand that the student civic engagement policy has been sent back to the committee to be rewritten. I want to encourage the board to continue to work on this policy until you have language that you feel reflects the intent of the policy and the reasons why we should adopt it. But I do also want to be sure that the efforts to pass this policy will continue, with the end result being a policy that reflects our communal belief that civic engagement is essential to responsible citizenship. Millions of eligible voters are missing from America's political decision-making process. In 2012, 18 to 29-year-olds, non-voters, most commonly cited not being registered as their reason for not voting. And the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, or CIRCLE, at Tufts University estimates that only 23% of eligible voters under age 20, meaning our high school kids, cast their ballots in the 2018 midterm elections. A Project Vote study from 2008 said, high school voter registration programs, a national trend with broad support, are an effective means of increasing electoral participation among young voters. To address low turnout among youth, a number of states, counties, and cities across the country have adopted laws, administrative rules, and mandates to increase voter participation through high school voter registration programs. A CIRCLE report stated multiple stakeholders have a role to play in creating the conditions for increased and more equitable youth voting. If a civic engagement policy is adopted, one that includes a twice-yearly voter registration drive, Upper Dublin would be part of a national trend to register and engage young voters. I'd like to highlight some reasons why I believe this policy is crucial. The first is that having a written policy requiring the district to support voter registration drives is a strong statement that we as a community value community engagement. The second is that having a written policy protects the rights of students who run those drives, regardless of how the student body and the administration may change from year to year. The requirement to run voter registration drives would remain a fundamental value in our schools, regardless of who is at the helm. Thirdly, early civic engagement leads to long-term engagement. Studies indicate that people who don't vote when they're eligible are more likely to never or only rarely vote in the future. So we are helping to instill good long-term habits in our students. Fourth, we're going to be empowering young people to take ownership of their right to belong and to have a say in how their country is governed, something that I feel is lacking in today's discourse. Fifth, a voter drive at school is just one tool that we can provide to allow students to register. Circle, at Tufts University, says that youth cite missed deadlines or lack of access to information as barriers to why they don't register, and that many youth do not trust or feel welcome in election offices and don't understand how to access information about registering and voting. Those are barriers that we can help to eliminate. Number 6, youth are underrepresented in the registered and voting electorate in the U.S. An estimated 31% of eligible people ages 18 to 29 voted in 2018, compared to 66% of 65-plus-year-olds. 7, all voter registration drives by law need to be nonpartisan. These drives would be no exception. Lots of resources are available from many nonprofits that specialize in educating students and teachers about how to run nonprofit voter registration guides, and we can utilize those resources. And finally, this policy can and should go hand in hand with a robust curriculum and teaching about civics K through 12. The original policy, as it was proposed, reads, "The board recognizes that voting is a fundamental right and seeks to promote lifelong civic engagement for all students," and I hope this will be a guiding principle moving forward. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the community for community input? All right, seeing none, community input is closed. Do I have any comments or feedback from Dr. Yanni or the board? Members of the board? Seeing none.
The civic engagement policy will come back to the next policy committee meeting, much like we did with the religion in schools policy, where we were very clear about the parameters that we don't endorse one religion over another. We'll be very clear about that in the civic engagement policy as well. One of the things that we want to make sure that we do inside the civic engagement policy is that we define clear parameters of what's in bounds and out of bounds, because we, as a district, cannot, the district, organizations attached to the district cannot endorse any one political party or candidate, and so we want to make sure that there are clear boundaries and clear parameters around that. So I look forward to bringing that to our next policy committee meeting, which is next Wednesday evening.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd just like to make some final announcements regarding our upcoming meetings. We have Education Committee Wednesday, February 4th, 6 p.m. Policy Committee, February 4th, following Education, approximately 7 p.m. Finance Committee, which now is composed of all items related to finance, including operations, Wednesday the 19th at 6 p.m. And the legislative meeting for February is on Monday the 24th at 7 p.m. Seeing no other business before the board tonight, I'm going to use my beautiful new gavel. Thank you, Brooke. This makes it official. Tonight's meeting is adjourned.